because the kids didn't default on their loans anymore once they could repay them back. And finally, if a young person gets out of college and becomes a teacher, a police officer, a nurse, a fireman, a mental health worker, goes into public service where we need them to do things and they're never going to get rich doing it, their service should pay their loan off. Every year they serve, This is one area where you don't have to take Hillary's word for it. You can look at her record. In this election year, when everybody else was sort of shirking duty and they all had to miss a bunch of votes, she left the campaign trail last fall and went back to Congress to pass a bill she sponsored called the Student Borrower's Bill of Rights. Here's what it does. It says to every student in America, if you graduate from college with a big debt, whatever you borrow is worth it because your college education is worth way more than $1 million over a lifetime to you and way more than $1 million to the rest of us. It is crazy because of the cost going up. You have young people dropping out of school today because they think, oh, I just can't borrow $10,000 or $20,000 more. I can't do it. I'll never pay it back. I know what I'm going to make when I get out. Under her bill, you have an absolute right, no matter what the loan terms are, to convert it into a loan where you pay it back as a very small percentage of your income over a longer number of years. That means nobody ever has to drop out of college again because of the borrowing cost of going. And it is a very big deal for the future of America. So, the final thing Hillary strongly believes is we have got to change this No Child Left Behind law. It does not work. And I have to tell you, this is the only guaranteed applause line in American politics this year. You could let me go back to the airport, get on a helicopter, and just drop me over Idaho somewhere, 200 miles from the nearest living Democrat. And I could shout that line and the elk would applaud. But I think it's important for you to know why. And this is another reason that sort of hidden benefits you get if you elect Hillary president. You know, she's been spending time in classrooms for over 30 years with teachers and with principals, and she knows a lot of this, but her position is this. It's a good thing to want the children of this community to learn at world-class standards. You want that, don't you? I mean, nobody's dodging accountability. We all want our kids to learn at world-class standards of excellence, science, math, technology, foreign languages. We do. And I hope you know we all can. We now have very sophisticated brain imaging technology equipment that takes a picture of it can take a picture of any brain in the world. And you know, most of us experience it if a loved one has a stroke. But they do studies with these things. I don't like them very much because they show when you get older, your brain gets a little smaller. We use a little of our brains, we got plenty left. But here's what these studies show. They show that over 98% of all the people, not just in America, on Earth, without regard to race or income, have the brain power to learn whatever they need to know to compete in the global economy. So we know we need to, and we know we can. We know that in most of our school districts there is a learning gap between where we are and the wealthiest competitors we have are at the 8th and 11th grade in science and math and technology and foreign languages. We also know why that gap is there. The other kids go to school longer. They start on the hard courses earlier. Their countries have national standards they've worked at for decades. And they pay their teachers more and train them harder and retrain them for a lifetime. They really work at this. Now we know that. And we know there's one other thing, you all clapped for it when I was talking about Hillary's role in it, but there's one thing it makes us that you ought to be proud of, and it cuts our scores a little bit. We don't put our disabled kids off in a closet somewhere. We put them in our schools and the rest of it. That you should be proud of. You should be proud of that. Okay, so we got this gap we got to close. Now here's how No Child Left Behind proposes to close the gap. It says, in this school district, you got to give your kids 5 tests, 5 years in a row, and we're going to give you federal money based on how your children do on the test. And then the law winks at Oregon and said, now don't sweat it too much, because you can pick the test in the passing score. Now just think about that. If you wanted to do this with a test, that is, close this gap, you would pick a hard test with a high score, wouldn't you? Wouldn't you? And you would say, look, we're going to make this fun. We're not going to whip anybody. We're going to make this fun. It may take us 10 years to get there, but we will be gaining on them. It'll be exciting. We'll measure our progress. We'll deal with psychology here. It'll be exciting. If you did that, you would be rewarded by losing all your federal money and your school budget would collapse. Already, 80% of the schools in America have cut back on history and political science and art and music. Already, they're struggling. If you did that, it would collapse. On the other hand, if you pick an easy test with a low score, you get your check every year. The kids, the teachers, the parents, the principals, they'd all still hate this, teaching the test. And over time, the children of this community will actually learn less, not more, just so you can get a check to keep the school doors open. This does not work, and we have to change it. That's what Hillary believes. So, since we can't pretend there's not a performance gap, how would Hillary propose to change it? It's one thing to make people clap about what's wrong with it. What does she propose in its place? I think she got a good idea here. One that she got in part by serving on the Armed Services Committee. Her view is that first, we're going to have 2 million teachers retire pretty soon, just aging out. So the federal government should play a larger role in recruiting and training and placing truly qualified teachers in these shortage areas, especially in rural areas and inner city schools where they're having trouble finding them. Then we should close the performance gap the same way any other organization committed to excellence does. Like, look at the Army. You know, no matter how much you may dislike the Iraq War, I hope we all recognize we got the finest military in the world.